To this day, there have been 45 dissimilar men who held the office of President of the United States, each of them bringing different qualities, leadership styles, and visions regarding the fate of the country. Among some presidents, very few have stood out in memory, those who shone as trailblazers, accomplishing different feats and goals during their time in office. However, others have been overshadowed with scandals and even impeachment. Although much of history comprises well-documented achievements, the bad and the good, this list turns to lesser-known presidential facts about those who have made their marks on history in other ways. From the only president to attain the rank of Eagle Scout, to the only president buried under a foreign flag, to the only president whose first language wasn't English. Such presidents stand out and still remain not only the first, but the only presidents to bear such distinct titles in the nation's highest office. Number 5. Abraham Lincoln. Whenever one speaks of Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States, he conjures up a lot of things: leadership through the tumultuous Civil War, the abolishment of enslaved people in the United States, and untimely death by John Wilkes Booth. Despite the fact that this legendary president did so much for America and had 32 memorials in America and other countries, it was an additional honor that Lincoln had the distinction of being the only US president who ever had a patent. Before entering the presidency, Lincoln had had a lifelong interest in things mechanical. In 1848, during a congressional recess, Lincoln started designing a device to lift boats over shoals. In the courses of Lincoln's expeditions as a young man, ferrying people and produce on the Mississippi River and Great Lakes, he had misadventures of the boats running aground on sandbars or getting caught up on other obstacles, leading him to think of equipping boats with inflatable bellows along the hull. Adjustable buoyant air chambers was an invention by Lincoln, which he would attach to the sides of a boat, lower into the water, inflate, and thereby lift the boat over any obstruction. He filed for a patent on March 10, 1849, and on May 22, 1849, patent number 6469 was issued. However, his device was never manufactured. Number 4. Gerald Ford. Leaving aside the fact that he was born with an entirely different name, he chose to give up a professional football career to a term as vice president and president that came in the wake of scandals. Nothing about Gerald Ford's path to the White House was ordinary. He was originally Leslie Lynch King, Jr., and his parents, Leslie Lynch King and Dorothy Ayer Gardner King, separated only 2 weeks after his birth. Dorothy then moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan from Omaha, Nebraska, and took the baby to her parents' house to stay with them. The Kings divorced later that same year. The future president was renamed after his stepfather and became known to his friends as Jerry. Not until December 3rd, 1935, however, had his name legally been changed to Gerald Rudolph Ford. Jr. Ford went on to attend the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor from 1931 to 1935. And though he was an exceedingly talented football player, Ford decided the legal profession was preferable to a career in professional football. Ford majored in economics and political science, and in June 1935, he graduated with a BA. After that, Ford attended Yale University, serving as an assistant football and boxing coach with a fellowship enabling him to follow the law degree course until he graduated in 1941. In 1948, Ford won his first elective office as a Republican congressman from Michigan and served in Congress for 25 years. However, following the resignation of Richard Nixon's vice president, Spiro T. Agnew, President Nixon named Ford as the first appointed vice president to take office. After what was probably the most comprehensive background investigation in FBI history, Ford was sworn in as vice president on December 6, 1973. Just 9 months into his vice presidency, Ford's time, 3 articles of impeachment passed through the House Judiciary Committee due to Nixon's involvement in the Watergate scandal. Nixon resigned effective August 9, 1974, and on the same day, Ford took the oath of office and became president, which made him the only unelected president and vice president of the nation. Ford also obtained another achievement, the only US president to have attained the rank of Eagle Scout, which is the highest attainable rank in the Boy Scouts. After Ford's death on December 26, 2006, his remains were taken at some period later to the Gerald R. Ford Museum for public viewing on January 2, 2007. 400 Eagle Scouts, between the ages of 15 and 85, stood in a line along the road next to the museum and saluted their fallen former president. Number 3. John Tyler. At age 67, William Henry Harrison became the oldest man elected president and the last president born under British rule. Unfortunately, with the weather so cold, the 9th President of the United States had no gloves, hat, or coat on when he took office on March 4, 1841. To make matters worse, Harrison, in the inaugural address, the longest inaugural address in history, began to develop a bad cold that finally turned fatal from pneumonia after speaking for 1 hour and 45 minutes. Serving only 32 days in office, Harrison became the first to die in office and also holds the sad record for the shortest time in office of any president. Following the untimely death of Harrison, Vice President John Tyler took his oath of office and therefore became the first vice president to ascend to the highest office in the land because of the death of his predecessor. However, the presidency of the 10th president, John Tyler, was a great and controversial tenure from 1841 to 1845. Despite annexing Texas into the Union, thus expanding on U.S. territories, the presidency of Tyler was also marked by political struggle and opposition from his own party. When he left the White House, Tyler returned to his plantation in Virginia to later join the South once the Civil War had broken out. Back in November 1861, Tyler had been elected to the Confederate House of Representatives but died on January 12, 1862, right before the term could start, at 71. Because Tyler was the President of the Confederate States of America, his death was the only one in presidential history not to have been officially recognized in Washington, D.C. Furthermore, there was no official proclamation from Lincoln for a period of official mourning, and his coffin was covered with a Confederate flag, making him the only president to be buried under a foreign flag. Number 2. Barack Obama. Sworn into office on the same Bible that Abraham Lincoln used during his inauguration in 1861, Barack Obama brought 1.8 million people to the National Mall in Washington, D.C. on January 20, 2009, to witness his induction as the first African-American president of the nation. It was one of those rare moments of great consequence in American history. But in addition to this historic first, the 44th president was also the first commander-in-chief born outside the contiguous 48 states. His parents, Barack Obama, Sr. and Stanley Ann Dunham, met in a Russian class in 1960 while both students at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. The two married on the 2nd of February 1961, and Barack II was born 6 months later, on August 4, 1961, in Honolulu, Hawaii. Though Barack Sr. later left to pursue a doctorate degree and to study at Harvard University, the couple later divorced in March 1964 when Obama was 2 years old. Obama's mother went on to marry a man, Lolo Soetoro, from Indonesia in 1965. A year later, the family moved to Jakarta, and Obama spent his early childhood in that place. However, several events in Indonesia left Obama's mother afraid for not only his safety, but also his education. And so, in 1971, at the age of 10, he was sent back to Hawaii to stay with his maternal grandparents. Number 1. George W. Bush. George W. Bush was the 43rd President of the United States, serving from 2001 to 2009. Born on July 6, 1946 in New Haven, Connecticut, he was the firstborn son to George H.W. Bush, the 41st President, and Barbara Bush. Raised in Texas, Bush graduated from Yale University in 1968 and then earned an MBA from Harvard Business School in 1975, becoming the first U.S. president with an MBA. Prior to his election as president, Bush had a very diverse career. He has served as a pilot for the Texas Air National Guard during the Vietnam War, worked in the oil industry, and was part owner of the Texas Rangers baseball team. His political rise was initiated when he was first elected governor of Texas in 1994. He held that position for 6 more years until 2000. During that time, he worked hard to improve the educational system, lower taxes, and reform tort law. In these efforts, he showcased his bipartisanship and gained an overall reputation for being collaborative. Bush's presidency was shadowed by momentous events and challenges, most especially the September 11th attacks in 2001. These attacks initiated the War on Terror, involving the invasions of both Afghanistan and Iraq. His domestic policies included massive tax cuts and education reform under the No Child Left Behind Act, and the controversy over how Hurricane Katrina's aftereffects were handled. George W. Bush is not the first US president who had a family member also serve as president. His father, George H.W. Bush, served from 1989 to 1993. Another case is John Quincy Adams, the sixth president, whose father was John Adams, the second president. In addition, Franklin D. Roosevelt, 32nd president, and Theodore Roosevelt, 26th president, were fifth cousins. But their family relationship did not stop there, as it included by blood and by marriage. FDR was married to Eleanor Roosevelt, who happened to be Theodore Roosevelt's niece. This meant Theodore Roosevelt was an uncle by marriage, at the same time a distant cousin to Franklin D. Roosevelt. What makes George W. Bush a first except the mentioned above MBA? If you have ever watched The Today Show with Hoda and Jenna, you must have met its co-anchor, Jenna Bush Hager. She and her fraternal sister, Barbara Pierce Bush, are the daughters of former US President George W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush. What makes these two first children special is the family uniqueness. George W. Bush happens to be the only president to have had twins. Thanks for coming along on this adventure with US Peaks. If you like the content, smash that like button, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button. Tap the notification bell so that you never miss our next adventure. We'd love to hear from you. Drop your thoughts and ideas down in the comments below.